So today we have with us Ron, Managing Director and Technology Fellow at Goldman Sachs. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Aghi. Thank you for having me. Just excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise. So how did you get started with your career?
My very first programming experience was with a language called Logo. It's a little graphical language. You have a turtle on the screen. You give it commands to move left, right, and it came on a 5¼ inch floppy disk, which I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And my very first program was I drew a house using Logo. That was my first experience, and I was completely hooked by it. And ever since then, I knew.
And how old were you?
Probably 8 or 9, somewhere around there. So hooked. It was like, I know this is going to be my future. A few years later, Windows 95 had just come out. I was playing with it. A friend of mine came by and
Developers.
said, developers. It's like, here's this thing called Java. It's going to be the biggest thing ever. I'm like, I don't know what that is. Sounds like coffee. But started playing with it. I remember it took me a whole week to get a Hello World printed out because I didn't know anything about object-oriented programming. But since then, did my undergraduate in computer science, and it just kind of took off from there. So I worked at a couple of startups, worked in finance, spent the better part of a decade at AWS, and now I've been at Goldman Sachs for 4 years. So it's definitely an exciting field, an exciting career, and I'm really, really happy that I'm part of it.
So at 8 years, you had the first inflection point, let's say it that way, that got into software engineering and then Java and Windows 95. And what got you into the finance side of software engineering, right?
Because what I was looking forward to was taking my computer knowledge and applying it to actual business practices and business principles. And I think it was a right time, right place kind of fit. And so that's how I ended up in finance. And I spent about 6 years, a little over 6 years in a company as well, just learning the ropes of like the different aspects of the business that goes around that makes finance what it is.
Goldman Sachs was maybe one of the very first banks to bring engineering in-house at scale, right? And so now has a strong engineering footprint, both geographically, headcount. So it really run the R&D like a Silicon Valley company. And so maybe elaborate, the shift and why that's important as a leading financial services, how it's important to have very strong engineering footprint.
Yeah, so engineering at Goldman Sachs is a strategic area of investment for the firm. Like about a quarter of the people that work at Goldman Sachs are part of engineering. So it's a pretty significant footprint. And everything we do from a technology point of view is something that is critical and powers the business. One of Goldman's operating principles, I think the key principle is really about what we call client focus. So it's really about understanding what your customers are trying to do and how you can support them and how you can make them more efficient and enable their business. And so for us, for Goldman Sachs as a firm, the number of areas we're working in, technology really is an enabler for it. Like it's something that's strategic. And I think we have an amazing combination of really good people. We have a very collaborative culture, and the technology that we have and we build actually enables this collaborative culture because it helps our people operate more effectively and efficiently on behalf of our clients. Our CIO, Marco Argenti, he says developers are first-class citizens of the firm. That's a very unique thing in a bank if you think about it, right? Because given the large size of our population, given how much we invest in engineering as an enabler for the rest of our businesses, it makes it a really exciting place to work at, given the breadth of opportunities and the challenges that we operate with, and the interesting problems that we get to solve on a day-to-day basis.
So developer first citizen, API first citizen.
Developers for citizens. APIs are a first-class construct at Goldman Sachs. I think given the size and scale and the different avenues and opportunities we have, you necessarily need this kind of decoupling. And so APIs are the perfect abstraction that gives you that kind of decoupling between technology, products, as well as different teams.
So your role at Goldman Sachs was it grew. What do you do day to day?
I've been at Goldman about 4 years at this point. I've been lucky enough to work with a bunch of platform teams. So I work within a core engineering organization, which is kind of like a foundational group that builds technology the rest of the firm builds on top of. And what my team does and what I get to do is we get to build these platforms that are then used by the different engineers at the firm in order to solve business-specific problems. So the way that works is, we'll build out our API platform, for example. So we provide services and SDKs that the rest of the engineers can use, but these services and SDKs have all kinds of requirements baked in. So, we're a bank, and so because we're regulated, we have controls we have to implement around compliance, around the different requirements that we have from the various regulatory agencies. And so instead of having tens of thousands of engineers implement these as they're building applications, my team builds out these requirements at the platform level, and we make them available to the different business teams. We call it a shared responsibility model. And so my team owns the responsibility down towards the infrastructure. Business teams own responsibility to the application and towards the client. And so we work together in a collaborative manner. It makes it a great partnership because it gives me the opportunity to get close to the business and understand the problem. I get to get engaged in the strategic aspects of where we're growing the business and the technology, drive a bunch of innovation, get to work with a bunch of really awesome people across the different regions, different cities, different geos that we have, and so we can make a difference collectively.
So you touched earlier about why APIs are important and for what you do, and so we're thinking about this concept we touched about banking as an API, right? How do you think about banking as an API at Goldman?
So we actually have a developer portal. If you go to developer.gs.com, you'll see we have a whole inventory of APIs and products that we offer as APIs, as services that clients external to Goldman Sachs can consume. We have a lot of technology that we want to make available through services. Different institutions can leverage our expertise, integrate into their solutions, and they can drive value for their business as well. So in developer.gs.com, we have our transaction banking business, which offers their API. So transaction banking is basically you can move cash from one point to the other, and you can do it through an API. The thing you have to realize about a business like TXB, it's not about the volume of the APIs, right?
The value per call.
Every API has a very significant value, and that's a different mindset when it comes to building and operating APIs at a bank or a regulated institution. I'll give you another really cool example. So internally, we use Microsoft Teams. We built an app for Goldman Sachs leadership that runs in Teams as a plugin, and all the data that it surfaces is through APIs. It's through my API platform team, which is leveraging Kong, and it's sourcing data from about 100 different data sources within Goldman Sachs, but it presents it within Teams in an easily consumable manner, and the people that have used it love it because they don't have to go to these 100 different places to find the data.
Mm-hmm. How many APIs now there are in the bank roughly?
So we have an API inventory, and the goal is to have them all surface through developer.gs.com as well as our portals.
Yeah. So you mentioned the portal for the public side, right? And obviously that's a distribution channel. It's new business, new revenue, building an ecosystem of partners and all of that. Then there is the internal APIs, right, which is more accelerating developer productivity to build apps faster with those building blocks, right? Majority probably are internal APIs, IPs, and there is a subset for public. How that's driving the business at the external facing level, but also how that's helping accelerating your internal developer productivity.
The way I look at APIs is it is a necessary abstraction and a necessary layer between different teams and different businesses, different organizations. What an API gives you is it gives you a strict contract that that, hey, this service is going to operate a certain way if I give it a certain set of inputs. And it also gives you this nice decoupling because then the different teams can move at their own velocity. Like the team that's consuming can move at their velocity building their application. The team that's operating the API can iterate on the implementation as they see fit. They can grow it, they can scale it, they can change the logic, whatever they need to do, as long as the contract remains the same and the guarantee remains the same. So for a firm like Goldman Sachs, where we have tens of thousands of engineers that's globally distributed, this is a really awesome concept because we can have teams that operate in a decoupled manner. They can evolve their infrastructure and their applications the way they see fit, and they don't have to stay coupled to each other. And it frees them to move at their own pace, as well as evolve their applications at their own pace. Where, again, where API Platform and Kong comes in, is we get to implement a bunch of these necessary capabilities through the platform layer itself. So, the team's content operating. We'll take rate limiting, for example, right? Everyone should have rate limiting on the APIs. Everyone should have authentication and authorization on their APIs. Everyone should do input-output validation. Instead of having every team implement these principles from scratch, we can offer them through the platform. We can leverage Kong and leverage plugins that offer a bunch of GS-specific capabilities, but ensures that these teams, as they're moving, they are continuing to build their applications without having to worry about the infrastructure itself. And I think that's a really killer feature.
Let's peel the beans to talk about the challenges dealing with APIs in the finance industry. Obviously, it's a very highly regulated industry.
I think it's a different kind of opportunity, and you're operating under a different set of constraints. For us, it's absolutely essential that we are operating APIs in a very secure, compliant manner, because ultimately, it's all about client focus for us, right? It's important for us that when we stand up our APIs, that they follow a lot of the standard requirements that we have. But also, we have a very high set of standards, and we want to ensure our APIs operating with those standards in mind. So things like authentication, authorization, rate limiting, having input validation, having any kind of quota management. Like these are non-negotiable for us when it comes to operating these APIs, especially at the scale at which Goldman Sachs operates. They're just like part of the first principles that you would need in order to operate an API. And so what we do as part of the platform team is, we're leveraging Kong. We leverage a bunch of Kong plugins in order to implement these capabilities. And we package them and we offer it to the business teams as either as an SDK or as a service. So when they're building the business applications, they get them out of the box. They know they're signed off, they're vetted, they're approved, they're compliant with a bunch of the standards that we have at the firm. And so then they can focus on really building their business application and driving value for our clients.
Obviously, we talked before about kind of this API first concept, right? And I would say, like, to build this API journey, you need the right process, the right tools, and the right also people. But overarching is about the culture. So how you get this API first culture, right? Whether it's for the internal APIs, external APIs, because you mentioned leveraging Kong as an API platform, and you have also thousands of APIs, right? So all these APIs have to kind of homogeneously go under the same platform in a way. But you can have the process, you can have the tools, but at the end, has to be the culture to make it work. So how you got this API first culture?
Yeah, so we've been actually API first for a while, for almost, I think, over a decade at this point. If you have a business that's offering capabilities for a web application as well as for a mobile application, you don't really have a choice. You have to expose that information through an API. So the application can consume the data appropriately from a common resource. As the business has grown and the firm has grown, we have naturally gravitated towards having APIs being the foundational construct on top of which all applications are being built. From a culture perspective, there's always the element of just making it easy to use, because generally the more friction you have, the harder it is to adopt a product. So again, from a platform team perspective, one of our primary goals is making onboarding as seamless and as easy as possible, right? Ideally, make it as self-service as you can. And that's kind of been like the foundational principle, right? We want to enable our developers to build on behalf of the business, but we also want to make it as friction-free and as effortless as possible. And that's kind of the key over here. Like if I give you a package, an API hosting solution, which has everything you need just baked into it, and there's almost no effort from your point of view to stand it up, it just makes it easy to convince you as the development team to adopt it, build on top of it, and leverage it as a core capability within your application itself. DevX has been absolutely essential to driving the culture. The other aspect has been just having that kind of ongoing trust kind of relationship, right? So making sure that we have the appropriate level of testing and a positive test, negative test as well. Those have been game changers for building trust with the teams. Having a set of core capabilities and well-documented constructs on how you can actually use these tools That's been a game changer as well. That just brings about this level of trust with the different teams, and so they can start depending on you in order to build other applications.
So now let's get into the hot stuff, Gen AI and AI. So as I mentioned earlier in my keynote, I think we're at this big shift of kind of value, interface value that is shifting. Like historically, we've been consuming internet in the last 20 years through UI, right? Whether it's our applications, click, mouse, browsing up and down, scrolling. And now we're moving where the value interface moving to the APIs, because we're moving from human-based services that need a UI to functions, because that's how we work, to machine-based services, whether that's an agent, it's an LLM, it's robotics, and those don't need really UI to functions. They just need an API. So I think it's this big shift between UI to APIs to consume internet. And I think you have, among many roles, you lead developer AI at Goldman Sachs. And at a very, very high level, how does Goldman Sachs thinks about AI?
I'm basically responsible for developer experience at Goldman Sachs. One of the aspects about DevX is leveraging AI for developers with the goal of helping them be more productive, more efficient, less distractions, helping them get in the zone and stay in the zone as much as they can. Goldman Sachs has a long history of innovation, right? The firm has been around 150 years. Goldman Sachs has been doing work with ML and AI for quite a while, actually. We have an applied AI team that's been in place for like over 4 years. They've been leveraging AI and ML to enable different businesses. The idea is really, taking advantage of ML and AI and see if you can apply it towards business problems to ultimately with the goal of trying to drive client value. So when Gen AI happened a couple of years ago, this team and a few other senior engineers, they've been very focused on how can we leverage generative AI specifically to drive this business value. The three pillars we've been focused on. The first one is around enabling the client experience and driving efficiency through that mechanism. The second one has been developer productivity, and the third one has been driving efficiency from an operational perspective. From a developer productivity perspective, it's been the first use case that we've been able to roll out Gen AI at scale, code completion, code bots, those kind of things, and that's been available. That's available to like all our engineers at this point. It's got tremendous uptake.
Is it true you get like 10% of productivity gain on the co-pilots side of the house?
So what Marco has shared publicly, and I'll repeat what he said, the key here is we are exploring these areas, but we're doing it in a safe, controlled manner, and we're making conscious decisions on how we want to proceed, keeping in mind our engineering tenets as well as the business principles.
That's awesome. I mean, I think obviously Gen AI will unleash a lot of productivity and operational efficiency, I mean, a better customer experience. At the end of the day, those are the objectives of the business. So how do you see the API ecosystem then evolving over the coming years? Right now, now it's a lot about Gen AI. It's a lot about large language models or tiny language models or custom models, but they all come out of the transformer papers, and maybe there's going to be something else in the future, right? And obviously, as a regulator, like we talked before, there has to be governance for AI, right? And I think we touch, many things in our discussion today. But how do you see this thing evolve? Like Rohan train of thoughts of the near future around Gen AI and AI in the finance industry?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying I think having an API in front of whatever model sets you're using is actually essential because it gives you that really nice abstraction, especially as these models are evolving and changing. It lets you change the underlying implementation as you like without having to change your application that's consuming that API. The closed source models, open source models, hosted models, whatever they might be, you can put them behind this API. You can build out an application, you can build out experience, and you can keep iterating with these different models as you need to without having to worry about application behaviors changing as much. Now, with models themselves, with models and APIs, there's a lot of work going on around responsible AI. And what that really means is there needs to be proper governance around it. We have a fairly solid governance process on consuming AI at the firm when it comes to evaluation, when it comes to different models, when it comes to the various licenses that they might come under. There's a lot of oversight that goes into ensuring that we're doing the right thing when it comes to consuming AI. If you're using a model, you want to ensure that it's being used appropriately, it's attached to a particular business case, it's operating within the bounds of the business case, things like hallucination rates are as low as possible. And I think this is actually where an API is actually very helpful, because things like you want to audit the prompts that are going, the responses that are coming back. That would naturally happen by putting an abstraction layer through an API in front of it. You want to control access to the model, do it through an API. You want to control, the rate at which the model is responding, or you want to have some kind of quota management on it, do it through an API, right? I think the API construct is very coupled with how these LLMs and models are going to be used going forward. We're already seeing it. I think it's only going to get bigger and bigger. And I think that's really how these systems are going to be coupled together and evolve together as a whole.
Yeah, like this is very important in what you're saying, because kind of you highlight basically the transition of governance and security and control observability happening at the traffic layer versus in the back end of the LLM, which as we think about history repeats itself. Microservices happen the same thing. First, we build all this governance backend over and over again, and then you move it at the API level, at the traffic level. I think LLM, it's happening the same pattern, where actually the governance would happen at the traffic level, because that's where you intercept everything, prompt. But at the end of the way, every token has an API calls behind the scene, and to really have a holistic approach, you have to get at the traffic layer. And this is one of the reasons we have our AI gateway that is having tremendous adoption, is to solve this kind of problems.
Yeah. Think of an LLM as a database. You don't generally consume it from a front-end application directly. You generally have an API layer in the middle, because it gives you exactly this control you just described.
So it's fair to say no AI without APIs at Goldman?
I would think no AI without APIs anywhere.
Nice. Well, thank you for being here, Rohan. Thank you, Rohan, from Goldman. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Aghi, and thank you for having me.
Thanks. Oh, we have one more announcement today before going to the breakout sessions with the amazing API Summit community. We're launching the first premium technology partner program. Of course, we do APIs, right? This allows the ecosystems to be tightly integrated with our API platforms, so we can provide better experience to our customers. This is about best-in-class integrations to Kong Connect and Kong Enterprise with state-of-the-art maintained features. It's R&D supported by Kong to keep always an up-to-date and staple versions of all our premium technology partners. It's also about go-to-market benefit, being together so we can give to our customer a better experience, better cost saving, better value as a whole platform with the best-in-class technology partner. We are starting a journey together with Confluent. Confluent is the #1 data streaming platforms. And if you think about it, it's kind of a different side of the same coin. We do APIs, request response, and Confluent does data streaming. And today, we're going to be very tightly integrated, so you can basically write on any Kafka topics all the logs and the messages into Confluent Cloud automatically from Connect and Kong Enterprise. This allows data team to work seamlessly with API platforms with data streaming technologies. That's the one launch partner that we have today in data streaming, the #1. #2, we are gonna have Dynatrace to give you an end-to-end API observability integrations that allows you to have tracing, logs, and metrics from Kong technology immediately available with Dynatrace format by using OpenTelemetry. So you can use the best-in-class observability platform with the best-in-class Connect API platforms and have an end-to-end API observability from logs to metrics to tracing. And the third launch partner I'm very excited about is in the API security space. It's Traceable. Traceable, it's about unmanaged APIs, having that visibility, finding those APIs. We're a tightly integrated Connect service catalog Now we can have an end-to-end visibility into all the APIs thanks to Traceable. Those are the three launch partners today that we're announcing the premium technology programs. Coming up next soon will also be Salt Security in the API security space as well. This will provide a much better ecosystem, title integrations, R&D supported, and go-to-market supported premium technology partners, so we can have always the most cohesive, unified API platform, now also intelligence. Like we say, no AI without APIs.